Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Today we're going to speak with Alysa. She's Miss Iowa 2023, and she has type 1 diabetes. What a terrific conversation with just an intelligent, thoughtful person. You're going to see in just a minute what I'm talking about. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you have type 1 diabetes or you are the caregiver of someone with type 1 and you're a U.S. resident, you can help with type 1 diabetes research by going to t1dexchange.org/juicebox, joining the registry, and completing the survey. This should take you about 10 minutes. You're going to be asked questions that you definitely know the answer to. It's not a big pressure situation. They collect that data, and with that data, they help make better decisions in research. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Please do check it out. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenfortype1.com for more info. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. An implantable 6-month sensor is what you get with Eversense, but you get so much more. Exceptional and consistent accuracy over 6 months, and distinct on-body vibe alerts when you're high or low. On-body vibe alerts? You don't even know what that means, do you? EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Go find out. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This is the meter that my daughter has on her person right now. It is incredibly accurate and waiting for you at contournext.com/juicebox.
My name is Alysa Goethe, and I have lived with type 1 diabetes for about 13 years now. I was diagnosed at 11 years old, and I'm also the first diabetic Miss Iowa.
Miss Iowa?
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen?
A lot of hard work, but really I started competing at 10 years old, so before I was even diagnosed. And there's a big performance element. I've always loved to sing, and that's what initially got me hooked. My mom actually was very against it because she didn't want me to be Toddlers and Tiaras, if you remember that show.
Oh, yeah.
And I basically wore her down until she said, fine, you'll lose and you'll get it out of your system. Then I won. So I've been doing it for 14 years, but I became really involved after I was diagnosed because of the community service element. It kind of helped me work through that grief of being diagnosed and being the only person in a graduating class of 400 people to be living with diabetes. Mm-hmm. And so getting to represent in an area where not a lot of representation is there or visible was a really big deal to me. And to win the title of Miss Iowa, being the first type 1 diabetic to do so is just the biggest honor.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to pick through it a little more, if you don't mind. Like, I don't get to hear about stuff like this. So you're saying that when you were 10 years old, you were singing and enjoying singing, yes, and you were looking for a place for an outlet for that? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually saw my cousin compete. I was invited to watch her in a competition, and I just was enamored by the talent portion. And I turned to my mom in the audience and I was like, hey, Mom, I want to do that. I want to sing for people. And that's when she initially said no. Now, also, you have to keep in mind, I was actually very much a tomboy, believe it or not,
mm-hmm,
and hated wearing shoes, hated wearing dresses, hated my hair done, hated makeup. So, of course, my mom was like, why on earth are you the girl that's wanting to do this? But now, if you look at me, you definitely wouldn't see the tomboy in me at all. But I wanted to sing for people, and I've always loved doing it. I sang in church growing up. I did voice lessons. I did talent shows. Anytime I could be on stage, I was doing it. And pageants were a great outlet for that.
Wow. And then you have to work your way through it. So what's the first thing you won?
I won my local county title. So we have different age divisions. We have Little Miss, Junior Miss, Teen, and then Miss. So depending on your age. I was 10, so I was in the junior miss, and I competed for junior miss Scott County in my hometown auditorium and had no idea what I was doing, was just trying to have fun. I kind of forgot that you could actually win. And when they called my name, I was like, oh yeah, this is a part of it. And then got crowned. So after the local level, you advance to the state. So I competed for Junior Miss Iowa, did not win, which is totally fine. Mm-hmm. And after state, then you go to the national competition. So this past January, after I won Miss Iowa, I actually went to Miss America, which was so surreal.
Wow. Okay, hold on. I'm going to get back to that. I want to know, do you play any sports?
I used to be in softball, but I quit after middle school.
Okay. You have to have a killer instinct a little bit, right, to compete and stuff like this. Like, do you want to win, or is it, do you know what I'm saying? Or is it you just go out there, you do your best, and whatever happens, happens, and you feel good about it? Like, you know what I mean? Like that feeling when you like lose a softball game, you're like, oh, I put all this effort and we didn't win. Does that feel like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, to be honest. But for me, the winning was not, oh my gosh, I want to be Miss Iowa. It was, I want to be Miss Iowa because of what it would mean for the diabetes community. And that was really my guiding light throughout the whole thing, because yes, it's cool to say I'm Miss Iowa, but seeing the reaction of people who see my CGM and then show me their devices, seeing people who reach out to me or comment on my posts saying they now feel okay with having diabetes because they've seen someone either in their state or in a space that maybe they're a part of where they don't feel represented actually be seen and visible. That's always been my biggest urge to win. And so in my little speech after I won, I made sure to say, you know, this is a win for not just me, but for the diabetes community. But the nice thing about competing is also you meet so many amazing and accomplished women that are all deserving of winning. And it's both very humbling, but also very inspiring because they are so kind. It's not at all like, you know, toddlers and tiaras. It's a little bit more like Miss Congeniality, where you actually get along and you make lifelong friends. I mean, in my crowning video, you can find it on YouTube. One of my best friends is behind me, literally off the floor in her full-length dress and heels, jumping up and down because she was so excited for me. So it doesn't feel as competitive as maybe a sports arena or event, because you're all rooting each other on and knowing that your own capabilities are deserving to win as well.
Yeah. It's not like then when my daughter was playing softball and we would just get real close and be like, don't forget why we're here, to make those other girls cry. Now get out there and kick their ass. Nothing like that. Right. Okay.
Nothing like that, no.
Hey, by the way, may seem off topic to you, but Michael Caine, who is in Miss Congeniality, the actor, picks his roles. He's very old now. Probably is not acting anymore, but he was picking his roles by the weather. So if it was cold where he lived, he'd pick a warm weather shoot, and that's how he would pick his script. And if it was warm where he lived, he'd pick a cooler weather shoot to get away from the...
Honestly, kind of smart.
He was using acting like a second home. It's fantastic. And I don't know, you said Miss Congeniality, and I thought, oh, Michael Caine was in that. I don't know why I thought any of that. So, okay, so you go to, you do these little things and you keep moving up. And I mean, the truth is it's such a, I mean, from my perspective, it's such an interesting mix of things that they're judging, right? Like, so obviously you're a little kid. They're not judging your body but they are judging looks, though, to some degree, are they not? Or is it just, how is it weighted, I guess, is my question.
What's really cool about the Miss America organization and Miss Iowa program is it's not based on who the prettiest is on stage by any means. It's a lot about scholarship and service. So I won about $12,000 in scholarship just by winning Miss Iowa that I'm able to put towards student loans and a master's degree, which is life-changing because I had to pay my way through college.
Wow.
And as an educator, it's really hard to pay back student loans. And so it's really nice to have that scholarship opportunity. So they really emphasize furthering your education and also your intellect, as well as your service, which again is a huge part of my, guiding force and guiding factor of even competing, because it helped me so much to realize that I could help other people. And seeing how you can do that on the state level and even the national level, I mean, is just so rewarding and so life-changing. Yeah. So focusing on those two elements, I mean, if you look up our Miss America, she is incredible. She's honestly overqualified. She has her own nonprofit for pancreatic cancer. She's the first active duty military officer to win Miss America. I mean, she's so kind as well. So it's really about, who you are and your dedication to service and furthering your education.
It's interesting. I like that. It seems more modern than I recall it growing up.
Yes.
Because, I'm not going to listen. I'm 52. How old are you? You're
I'm 24.
You're 24. Yeah, you were diagnosed when you were 11. I know, I got it. I mean, it was a bikini contest when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. It's nice to see how it's grown, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because it used to feel like, I don't know, the prettiest girl from a state picked up a flute and was like, there's my, that's what, I'm good. I played a flute. And you're like, you don't play the flute. So people who are older like me, who remember it like that, wouldn't recognize this. This is I was almost going to say like the Cub Scouts, but maybe it is a little bit about like learning, doing, helping, being a leader, kind of that idea. From the very beginning, your kids mean everything to you. That means you do anything for them, especially if they're at risk. So when it comes to type 1 diabetes, screen it like you mean it. Now, up to 90% of type 1 diagnoses have no family history. But if you have a family history, you are up to 15 times more likely to develop type 1. Screen it like you mean it, because type 1 diabetes can develop at any age. And once you get results, you can get prepared for your child's future. So screen it like you mean it. Type 1 starts long before there are symptoms, but one blood test could help you spot it early, before they need insulin, and could lower the risk of serious complications like diabetic ketoacidosis or DKA. Talk to your doctor about how to screen for type 1 diabetes, because the more you know, the more you can do. So don't wait. Tap now or visit screenedfortype1.com to learn more. Again, that's screenedfortype1.com, and screen it like you mean it.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's really cool that I appreciate is I think it was 2018, Miss America actually got rid of the swimsuit portion entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And recently they added health and fitness, which is much less about how you look in activewear, but rather what your definition of healthy is and being confident in who you are. And I really love that. I was not the thinnest person on stage by any means, but I was showing how confident I was with all the hard work I put into managing my diabetes. And I got to talk about that on stage. And so honestly, for me, it's a really cool outlet to share even more of a glimpse into my diabetes journey and show that healthy might look different for certain people.
Yeah.
And that just because I have diabetes, it's actually a joke my dad and I have. He also has type 1. We always say, despite our diabetes, we're the healthiest people we know. And so getting to showcase that is something I think is really neat.
How old was your dad when he's diagnosed?
He was 13. So he's lived with it for, 43 years now.
Did you guys talk about his diabetes prior to your diagnosis, or was it a thing that wasn't really, or you might not remember, you're only 10 probably, but do you remember knowing a lot about his type 1 before you had it yourself?
I didn't know a whole lot, to be honest, because I was so young that I don't think my parents understood that I would understand it, But I at least saw him doing it. But in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, my dad just has to take shots at dinner. It wasn't ever, oh, this is because of his diabetes. And I also remember there were times growing up, he would have really bad low reactions because he couldn't feel his low blood sugars. Now, this was before CGMs were really a thing or even marketed to the mass public.
Yeah.
So there'd be times where he'd be, almost seeming intoxicated or like he was on drugs because his blood sugar was so low that I grew up having to know to call 911 and how to get people there so my mom could try to get him juice or get him something or glucagon. So those things were part of my life, but I didn't understand that was because of diabetes. I just thought that's how dad is. Me being naive and thinking, oh, that's just my dad. But then once I was diagnosed, the dots kind of connected for me.
Yeah.
And my dad actually felt really guilty for a really long time about thinking it was his fault that I got diabetes. And actually my brother was just diagnosed last year. He's older than me. So he had that same, emotion when my brother was just diagnosed, that he felt like he did it to us.
Yeah.
Oh, it always makes me emotional to talk about. But really, it's kind of nice to have someone else in my family that I can relate to and ask for guidance from, because he takes care of his diabetes so well, especially knowing that my brother and I have it. And he's just been a great role model throughout the whole thing. So if anything, I'm actually really grateful that we both are kind of in it together. I say we're dia buddies.
Your brother was just diagnosed. How old is he?
He was 26 when he was diagnosed, so he was significantly older.
And do you have any other brothers or sisters?
Nope, it's just us two.
And is there any other autoimmune happening, like celiac, thyroid, anything like that?
No, I mean, knock on wood, not yet. I was tested for celiac, but I don't have it. We're very fortunate. But it's interesting because also my grandmother on my mom's side has type 1. So there are 4 people in my family that have it, and I'm getting it from both sides. So honestly,
yeah,
it was bound to happen.
Alyssa, colloquially, that's known as screwed. So your dad has type 1 on your father's side, on your mother's side, your mom's mom?
Yes.
Oh, is that sort of how maybe your mom and dad got together?
Actually, no.
No.
Their story, okay, this is a tangent, but their love story is kind of insane. So, my parents worked at a grocery store together, and they dated for approximately a month before my dad proposed. And they were engaged for only a year and a half, which sounds long, but they were long distance for all of it. And then they didn't live together really until they got married. And they're still together 30 some years later.
Yo, your mom hot or something? What's going on there? Your dad tried real hard there. You know what I mean?
Listen, I asked if it was like a shotgun wedding or something, and they say no.
I'm telling you right now, one generation later, if a guy liked you that much, you'd call the cops and tell him to keep him away from you. You'd be like, oh, this guy's a little too into it. You know what I mean?
It's become a fun story to share with people.
Yeah, no,
sure.
It's nice. But my thought is that when your mom was younger, she wasn't put off by diabetes in a mate because her mom had it, maybe. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it was something she was accustomed to.
Yes.
Do you have any idea? It's so interesting. So what kind of gear does your dad use now? Diabetes stuff.
He uses a Dexcom G6 and an Omnipod. He just got the Omnipod not even a year ago, I think. And he really loves it. He never had a pump before. He's a very active person. I mean, in the summer, he does the JDRF bike ride. He is always outside either building something or gardening. He's always out and about. So he always thought the pumps that had the tubing would be in the way.
Yeah.
And so he's very adamant about doing MDI. And then he heard of the Omnipod and he really loves that. Now I have the Freestyle Libre, so I'm still waiting to get that connected to an Omnipod, and then I'll definitely be on that. But he really loves that. But he always talks about how different it is compared to when he was first diagnosed.
Yeah.
I mean, he started out taking 1 shot a day, peeing on a stick to see if he had ketones, and eating a very structured diet every single day, to now being so flexible with a pump and a CGM, which weren't even a thing when he was diagnosed.
Your dad may have started on beef and pork insulin. That might be how long ago he did this. And animal insulin, then maybe it moved to NPH and regular at some point, but he would have been on those structured eating plans. Is he a fit person today still?
Yes,
He
very.
is. The reason I ask is because I do a lot of management series with a woman named Jenny Smith, and she's a CDE, but also she was diagnosed years and years ago to some kind of more Midwestern parents who put her on a very structured eating schedule. And she's a fit, good eater to this day. It's interesting, but it's interesting because I think you have to have the personality for it. I think there are some people who could, if they were intersected with that, hey, we're going to eat like this now, they might rebel against it, but some people like it. So it makes me think that maybe your dad either didn't have a choice or was okay with the program, and then it actually built up a lifestyle for him.
I think it did.
Yeah.
I mean, he definitely had his rebellious years, as he's told me, where he didn't necessarily want to take care of his diabetes, which we now know is, diabetes burnout. And I had my own experience with that as well in high school. But especially when he was first diagnosed, he was the only one in his family that had it. And also he's adopted. So he didn't know anything about his family history. So it really was a big surprise for them. I think his blood sugar was in the 700s when he was diagnosed. I mean, the fact that he was able to lead a healthy life and still be, a picture of health today is just amazing.
That's wonderful. Did it carry over to you? Do you kind of eat and take care of yourself the way he does?
Yes, but it is very different living with diabetes now versus when I was diagnosed versus when he was diagnosed.
Of course.
So they started me on a very structured, specific carb count. So I took the same insulin every time. And my A1C when I went back was like 5.8. I was killing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they put me on the flexible, ratio, that's when it was a little more challenging with puberty.
Yeah.
Puberty with diabetes is not for the faint of heart. It is not fun, as I'm sure you know. But
yeah, I know. Don't worry, I know.
it was rough, especially for me because I was almost 12 when I was diagnosed. It was my first week of middle school, which is so much fun anyway. Adding diabetes on top of that is even more fun. And my honeymoon phase actually ended as my puberty kind of really ramped up.
Mm-hmm.
So that mixed together was just chaos.
A mess, yeah.
So once I got into college and I got a CGM for the first time, I mean, my A1C was just so much better and I was eating better. And so now I'm a lot more like my dad, where there's some flexibility, but I'm really able to take care of myself, which is great.
Yeah, I want to jump back. You said that you experienced some burnout in high school. What did that look like?
Mm-hmm. For me, it was not always taking insulin for snacks. I always took insulin for meals, but if I was hungry, I would just eat because that's what other people my age were doing. And from the time I was diagnosed until I graduated high school, I was the only person with diabetes in my graduating class of about 400 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was bullied because of it, especially that first week when I went back to school. People just didn't understand what I was going through. They thought it was unfair that I got to leave class sometimes, even though it was to deal with a low blood sugar, which is one of the worst feelings in the world. They thought it was unfair that I got to be in the front of the lunch line, but they didn't see myself giving injections before lunch. And that's why I had to leave early. I mean, I just felt so misunderstood and I longed to be quote unquote normal and like my peers that I wanted to hide my diabetes and I didn't want anyone to address it. So if we were out to eat for a field trip, I would wait to take my insulin until my blood sugar was already too high. Or I didn't take insulin for snacks. I didn't always check my blood sugars as often as I should have. And when I got to about my senior year, I realized, one, I needed to take care of myself, especially if I was going off to college, because I did not want to have to be dependent on my family if something were to happen. But also, I just started to really embrace it. I got a friend group that asked great questions and were there to really uplift me through it. And I started realizing that if people didn't like my diabetes, and that was their problem and not mine.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to ask some questions. You're not going to understand why I'm asking for a minute, but
okay.
What do your parents do for a living?
My mom is a kindergarten teacher, and my dad works for the government.
Okay. Do you know your IQ?
I do not.
Okay.
I probably should, though.
Here's why I'm asking. You are so agile conversationally. I got your IQ in the 130s, maybe.
Oh,
so
well, thank you.
No, I've talked to a lot of people. I want to know. You please go take an IQ test and get back to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So at first I thought, oh, Alysa's just a practice speaker because of the pageant system, right? I truly think if I said to you, maple trees or oak trees, which do you prefer? I think you and I could have like a thoughtful conversation about it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm already thinking of an answer.
And I think it comes from like that kind of agility comes from intelligence. And so you're really like, you're a wonderful speaker. And
thank you.
Yeah, no, please. And you've got that like middle of the country. I can't tell where you're from. No accent, which is fantastic. Like you enunciate all your words. You complete your thoughts. I tried to take you into a circle and then ask you a question and you still answered it. And I was like, God, she's really good at this. But seriously, like you're a teacher now?
Yes, I'm a music teacher.
Oh, I was going to ask, what are you teaching? Because those kids are going to really know it when it's over.
Well, I love music theory, which is basically a Sudoku puzzle for music. So I'm hoping they can understand that complicated topic when I teach it.
Well, some of them aren't. Some are going to be little dummies, but that's not your fault. But seriously, like I feel like you could have done anything you wanted to do. The Contour NextGen blood glucose meter is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. And it's entirely possible that it is less expensive in cash than you're paying right now for your meter through your insurance company. That's right. If you go to my link, contournext.com/juicebox, you're going to find links to Walmart, Amazon, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Kroger, and Meijer. You could be paying more right now through your insurance for your test strips and meter than you would pay through my link for the Contour NextGen and Contour Next test strips. in cash. What am I saying? My link may be cheaper out of your pocket than you're paying right now, even with your insurance. And I don't know what meter you have right now. I can't say that. But what I can say for sure is that the Contour NextGen meter is accurate. It is reliable, and it is the meter that we've been using for years. ContourNext.com/juicebox. And if you already have a Contour meter and you're buying test strips, doing so through the Juicebox Podcast link will help to support the show. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense. And Eversense is the implantable CGM that lasts 6 months. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Have you ever been running out the door and knocked your CGM off? Or had somewhere to be and realized that your adhesive was about to fall off? That won't happen with Eversense. Eversense won't get sweaty and slide off. It won't bang into a door jamb, and it lasts 6 months, not just a couple days or a week. The Eversense CGM has a silicone-based adhesive for its transmitter, which you change every day. So it's not one of those super sticky things that's designed to stay on you forever and ever, even though we know they don't work sometimes. But that's not the point. Because it's not that kind of adhesive, you shouldn't see any skin irritations. So if you've had skin irritations with other products, maybe you should try Eversense. Unique, implantable, and accurate. So if you're tired of dealing with things falling off or being too sticky or not sticky enough or not staying on for the life of the sensor, you probably want to check out Eversense. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com.
Oh, well, thank you.
Did you have that feeling? No. You don't have to be too nice to me. Did you have that feeling in college? Were you like, I have endless possibilities here?
I don't know, actually. All I knew is, so I'm very type A, and I'm also someone that is very stubborn and determined. So growing up with my mom as a kindergarten teacher, I would see the chaos that happens in the kindergarten room. And I said, I'm never, ever being a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very aware of that. I was so vocal about it. But I knew I wanted to do something with music. And that does limit some of your possibilities because you do have to pay the bills and music doesn't always do that.
Yeah.
And so I went to school with just a music major, knowing this is what I really love to do. And I want to find some sort of outlet where I can use music. I mean, just like how I got into pageants, music was a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And then when I was in college, I started tutoring people and, at the top of my classes. And I just realized, I really have an affinity for teaching and explaining things for people and a talent for that. Why don't I, just...
Yeah, it's because you see things clearly and quickly.
I think that's what it is. And I do really understand music. I mean, I loved music theory. Not to brag, but I got a 5 on the AP exam, which was a big deal.
Oh, listen.
So, I mean...
I've known you for 25 minutes, and I'd adopt you if something happened to your parents right now, because I think you're a winner. You see what I'm saying? I think we can make some money off you. I'm not talking like that. But seriously, like, do you play instruments?
I do. I actually play 8 instruments.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You probably play multiple instruments, which is a clear indication of intelligence.
Well, thank you.
No, stop. Have your parents never pumped you up like this?
I mean, they did, but also I just think I have a lot of intrinsic motivation. And the things that I excel at are things I really love to do. So I don't feel like I'm working for it.
Try having that motivation with a 90 IQ. It ain't going to go the same. Okay. All right. So by the way, 90 is a fantastic IQ. Like if your IQ's out there is 90, like you're killing it. Like, but I'm saying that those extra points, I think we're getting into a spot, Alyssa, where I'm now talking about stuff that I don't usually say on the podcast, but I do say privately. Those last 20 IQ points is where you see something like that. Like there's an average IQ where lovely people exist. And there's a slightly higher one. You can see people a little more agile, meaning they can kind of think into layers. This is the way I think about it anyway. Like the way thoughts layer on top of each other and one thing supports the next and you start getting perspective from a 360 instead of from a singular perspective. So some people look at the world through their eyes. They see that perspective. And some people stay in the middle of the sphere and can see all around them. Mm-hmm. I think the amount that you can see around you in that 360, at some point becomes about just computing power. And we can say it's intelligence, but it's like RAM. You know what I mean? Like you can, it's so funny. We talked about this before we started. The kids don't know how computers work, but your computer has memory in it, right? And it's this place where it does its processing. It's how much space it has to think. And I think of IQ points sort of the same way. Like the more space you have to think, the more things you can consider at the same time. And when you really see a clear person, I think they're clear because they can hold a lot of different ideas at the same time and juxtapose them against each other. And I realized just now that if my son heard me say that, he'd be like, why did you have to say juxtapose? Because you're trying to say smart? But no, because that's really the word I want to use there. And so I should have just said out loud, I know you play multiple instruments. How many do you play? Because I had it in my heart already that you could play a lot of instruments. You might be undervaluing yourself.
I feel like I'm very humble, and that's probably the most humble thing I could say, that I'm very humble.
No. I think it's possible I find you in 20 years and you're doing something that's a lot bigger than, not that what you're doing now isn't lovely, but I think it's possible that you continue to grow as a person and find bigger and bigger things to do because I think you can handle them.
I mean, that is the goal.
Oh, I bet.
I want to keep, whether I stay in teaching or not, I do want to continue diabetes advocacy, whether it's professionally or, just out of.
Ooh, Alysa, you're gone. Hold on a second.
In this community.
Hey, Alysa, you disappeared. Go back to advocacy for me.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you came back.
Okay, perfect. So sorry.
No, it's you live in Iowa, right? Don't you?
I am in Iowa.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, right now, like, aren't you grinding corn to make fuel to run the generator so your internet works or something like that?
No. I live in the Des Moines area, which is our state capital.
Oh.
Okay, this is a side story.
In the city. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, I live in a city. But when I lived in Chicago for 1 year for my freshman year of college before I moved back to Des Moines. It was a little too big for me for the Iowa gal. But when I met someone, they first of all thought I was in Ohio because we always get confused for Ohio or Idaho. And their first thought was, so what's it like living on a farm?
Well, that's my first thought. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. And so I turned to him and I said, well, my dad has a garden, but that's about it. Like, I don't know what you mean. So it's funny to me when people think that's all of Iowa. We do have cities. They're not huge, but we do have them. I
walked into, I did a speaking thing in Kansas City one time, and they picked me up at the airport. And to say it was an airport, I mean, I have a McDonald's bigger than that airport at my house. They're like, well, the guy said, I'm going to take you into the city. And I was like, oh, okay. It actually felt like, if anybody's ever played Sim City, the city building game on a computer, like, when you put down your first 3 buildings next to each other, like that's what the city felt like to me. I was like, oh, they put 5 buildings here over 3 stories tall, and they think, and this is the city, they call it. I'm like, oh, it's fascinating. Like if I took them to Chicago or to New York or something, their head may explode. If they, so what was that like when you went to Chicago for the first time? Were you like, oh, hell, okay, I see it now?
For me, I grew up going to Chicago. I have family that lives there. And so every year I would go and I loved to visit.
Yeah.
But it's very different living there than it is just visiting.
Okay.
Because I was right downtown. I had classes on Michigan Avenue. I was in the South Loop. I was, walking everywhere, taking the L train at 18 years old as someone who had never lived anywhere other than Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very different living there than visiting. And I just realized it was a little too fast paced for me with how much was changing in my life already, like moving, going off to college for the first time. I was just a music major. I didn't have a specific end point or end goal like I did with teaching.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of change and figuring out for my life that I had to do. And I just realized that Chicago wasn't the vibe for me, but it did make me realize how much I love Iowa. So to be able to represent Iowa is just that much more special.
Do you have trouble dating, or you? But I mean,
I do not.
Okay, you met somebody you like and all that.
Yes, I do have a boyfriend. It's been about 3 years.
Oh, okay. So, what were you looking for in a boyfriend?
I really love a singer with a deep voice. Which is very specific. We met in college because we were in the same program. We were both studying music education, and he's an amazing singer. So that initially attracted me. But ultimately someone who is patient and kind was kind of which is very vague, but that's something I was really looking for because I've just heard too many horror stories from friends who went on dates with guys who were not very nice.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that to be me. But also I needed someone who would be patient and ready to learn about diabetes because, again, that's such a big part of my family that it was important for him to know that. And he's been great. We keep emergency low snacks by the bed. I mean, he's always wondering how my blood sugar's doing. There was a time where, he came home for Christmas with me and my dad had a really bad reaction that his CGM didn't catch and I had to call 911 and he was there to comfort me and help me through it. So, I mean, that's a big thing for me too.
Yeah. Plus he's got a deep voice, so that doesn't hurt anything.
Exactly.
Hey, your dad, is he using Omnipod DASH or 5?
5.
Okay. Is that helping him? Like, is his life changed pretty significantly because of that, do you think?
He was actually really, really good with injections. He was always really on top of it, but it has made his life a lot easier.
Yeah, let me stop you for a minute. Like, but he got low a lot though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you know what I mean? Not that he wasn't doing well, but he was probably doing well, like lower A1Cs because he was really keeping his blood sugar low, but he was having, I think, too many. Like, it sounds to me like a lot of excursions where like we had to call 911. Like, is he having fewer of those on pumping?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
I think he stopped having so many when he got the CGM too. The CGM was honestly more life-saving in my opinion for him just because he's never been able to feel his low blood sugars ever.
Yeah.
And being able to hear that and do damage control before it gets too low is really
deal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it'll happen in the night and he can't wake up. So then my mom has to, wake up in the middle of the night and take care of him or he, ends up collapsing or something. So having the CGM really helped. And then there were probably only 2 in between the CGM and getting the Omnipod that he had that were unfortunately just undetected by the CGM.
Yeah, but I'm glad for him that he has that stuff. Do you know where he keeps his A1C?
He's around 6. He does really, really well.
Yeah, I would imagine. Like now having had type 1 for as long as you have, which is what, like 13 years, you said, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How would you describe your management at this point? Like, are you down to like the nitty gritty? Are you looking at fat and protein in your meals to stop later rises? Are you, manipulating it more with how you eat? Like, what is it you do day to day that leads to your successes in health?
Yeah, actually this year as Miss Iowa, because I'm constantly on the road, I've traveled more than 40,000 miles this year, and which is a lot for those who don't realize that. Learning how to deal with flexibility, because when I'm just teaching, your day is really structured. But when I'm traveling from county to county or even to other parts of the country, that throws things off. So learning how to adapt to flexibility has been a really huge part of my year, and I feel like I've done it really well. I also had personal trainers this year, which has been really helpful because I didn't realize, and this is where you might take back your comment about me being really smart. I didn't realize that protein was such an important part in stabilizing your blood sugar. No one ever told me about that, and I just didn't realize it. So I went from I still had protein in my day-to-day life, but I've really been prioritizing that, especially in the morning, because I have a really bad dawn effect.
Okay.
Where I wake up and it just starts to rise for no reason at all, which is really fun. So prioritizing protein has been a big part of my management, and that's really helped me level out my blood sugars a lot. So I see fewer spikes, which has been great. But otherwise, it's kind of the things I've been doing that are second nature.
Okay. Well, don't confuse being young with not being intelligent. Like you still have to have experiences to learn things. But
it's true.
Yeah. So so you open your eyes, your blood sugar starts going up.
Basically,
and
it could be in the 80s all night, like perfect. And then I'll wake up, shower, look at my phone, and it rises to like 150.
Yeah. So
without eating anything. Let
me ask you this. You identified yourself earlier as a type A personality.
Yes.
So do you wake up and start really thinking about what you have to do?
Oh, I think about it before I even wake up. I sometimes have dreams about what I have to do the next day.
Yeah, that's probably why your blood sugar goes up in the morning. You might have what they call feet on the floor. And it might be less about a dawn phenomenon. And because if you're sleeping in the 80s and your blood sugar is literally not going up until you start your day, there's a little difference between dawn phenomenon and feet on the floor. And feet on the floor just kind of means like when I stand up and life hits me, that adrenaline and the cortisol pop gets you. And then you're suddenly the amount of insulin that was good to keep you stable overnight at 85 is not enough to stop what's happening. You're getting an actual impact on your blood sugar from that. It's seriously, well, there's no way to think about it because you'll just think about it and make your blood sugar higher. My easiest example is that my daughter is very specific about doing well in school. And I didn't really know that about her. I have 2 kids, but my daughter's a little bit of a blend of my wife and I in one specific way. So my wife's very like type A, get it done, do a good job. It's important to do a good job. And I'm more like, it'll be fine. Right. So my daughter has an it'll be fine attitude with an underlying of, oh my God, I got to get this right. And she'd go to school and need more insulin all day, like more basal, more aggressive insulin sensitivity, like everything throughout the day. But the minute school ended, her blood sugar would start to fall because the release was there. Like she wasn't worried or thinking about school anymore. And I do wonder if maybe that's not something that's happening to you. Interesting.
I would not be surprised, actually, now that you say that. When I'm in stressful situations, I mean, my blood sugar will shoot up to the 300s. I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're not as chill on the inside as you are on the outside.
Right.
Because on the outside, you seem chill. You seem chill and thoughtful, but your brain's racing, maybe. Is that possible?
I think that's what it is. I also do have anxiety, which just paired with diabetes already is not very fun because then you're anxious about your diabetes and then you see your blood sugar go up and you're like, oh, wow, now I'm more anxious, which will just make it higher and higher, which is so fun.
Caught in a perpetual loop of it just keeping itself spinning, right?
Right. But I've noticed my blood sugar also tends to hang out a little bit lower in the evening. I don't always necessarily drop low, but it tends to be a little lower in my range than throughout the day. So that's something to really consider.
Yeah, when you relax, right?
Yeah.
See? That's how you learn things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Why did you want to come on the podcast?
I had heard about it it was actually a post from Beyond Type 1 that said, here are some good diabetes podcasts to listen to. So I was listening to it and I just love that you share people's stories and it's really real. And that's something that I feel like the diabetes community needs because you can see posts by nonprofits all the time, but until you really hear someone's story, that's when you start to feel less alone.
Yeah.
And I just realized, oh my gosh, I would love to do that. And then I think someone had tagged me on Facebook when you made a post in the group saying, oh, we're looking for people or whatever. And they said, oh, Alysa would be great for this. And I was like, I never thought about putting myself up for it, but sure.
Oh, no, that's great.
That's why I'm here.
I have to tell you, I'm having a lovely time talking to you. I wasn't kidding. I would happily adopt you. And especially now that you're not really financially needing of me, I'm going to make it an admission to you, right?
Okay.
When you reached out, I was like, am I going to talk to Miss Iowa? Like, what are we going to talk about? You know what I mean? Like, what are we going to talk about? And is she going to tell me about picking dresses? And, I'm like, because I don't know how long I can do that for exactly. Like, I can muster that up for my daughter. You know what I mean? But I don't do it a lot with a lot of other people. I just want people to realize that, this is the example of why you talk to so many different people. Because you just really, until you get to know them, all you have is your supposition and you're often incorrect, I'm not saying that I thought you were going to be ditzy and I didn't have that feeling. I'm being serious. I didn't think that, but I did wonder, would you come on here and just want to talk about pageants or, would I hear you say Miss Iowa 800,000 times or something like that? Or would I joke with you and you'd get stiff because you'd think I don't want anybody to hear me from the pageant community, but you're just absolutely lovely. Your parents should be very proud. Oh, you're welcome. Did they do this or is this you? Is this a nature nurture thing or what do we got here?
I think both. I mean, my parents are amazing. My mom was born to be a mom, and my dad has been a great role model for me, like I said, with diabetes. Mm-hmm. He's also so proud that anywhere he goes, he will somehow find a way to bring up, oh, my daughter's Miss Iowa. I'm like, Dad, you're talking to a random person on the street, and that it wasn't part of the conversation. He just brings it up when he can't. Like proud. He's very proud.
Yeah.
So yes, they are proud of me. And my mom, it's funny. I went to her school for a school visit because I like to do presentations on, diabetes and, accomplishing things despite your obstacles that you may face. And so I went to her kindergarten classroom. I said, well, if I'm a princess, what does that make my mom? They're like, a queen. So now they always say hi, queen to her at school. And it's really cute.
That's very nice. Do you bring the magic wand with you and the hat when you talk to people?
Definitely the hat, my sparkly hat. But I don't have a magic wand. I do have a sash. And I tell kids it's like a big name tag. It's to the point where if someone says Miss Iowa, I will whip my head around and respond. And so that's going to be really hard to get used to when I'm not Miss Iowa anymore.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what Hermione Granger's wand was called because I imagined you with a scepter, if I'm being honest, where you touch people and knight them, but I guess they don't give you that power, right?
No, unfortunately not.
So did you say that so once you're Miss Iowa, then you go to Miss America?
Yes.
How was that? So now I'm going to completely sound like a hypocrite. What was that experience like? Did it feel like you went from like minor league baseball to like the pros or is it all about the same? It's just the name's different on the show.
It did feel a little bit like stepping up to the big leagues. I mean, the production was next level. We had choreographers flown in. We had a hair and makeup team. I mean, things that Iowa just, we don't have. I competed against like 17 other women, which is still, 17 other women who are all accomplished and amazing and talented. I mean, that's still tough.
Yeah.
But then you're also competing against girls who come from, like my friend, she's amazing. She's Miss Texas. She competed against like 60 other girls. That's more than the amount of people that even compete at Miss America. So you're like, how can I compete with that? There was a lot of imposter syndrome going on for sure. Just knowing I came from a smaller state and seeing like how many girls I was surrounded by who are so qualified and so just accomplished. Yeah. But then you also have to remember, well, I'm here for a reason. And Iowa is no less of a state than a Texas or California or Hawaii. We're just all very different. So I just kind of focused on making friends and making memories because for me, the dream was always Miss Iowa. It was just honestly a cherry on top to go to Miss America and experience it. And I had a wonderful time. I did not win a single award, and I still am so proud of what I did and what I accomplished.
Were you referencing Avery Bishop?
She was Miss Texas last year.
Oh,
so the current Miss Texas
okay.
is Ellie Bro, and she was actually first runner-up to Miss America. She is the kindest human. I love her so much.
Wow. And so you guys make kind of lifelong friends doing this too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the really cool thing is you have friends in every state now, plus Washington, D.C. So if I travel, I know that I have a place to stay, which is really nice on a teacher salary.
I have to tell you that you were thoughtful enough to include for people that Washington, D.C. is not a state. I think that's the core of who you are right there. That was fantastic. You were like, so many states plus Washington, D.C., which, as you know, is not a state.
I can't forget my D.C. girl.
No, but
she's great.
No, but Alysa, that you took the time to make sure that, like, if you just said, like, all the states, it would be, you wouldn't have to, I don't know, you wouldn't have to qualify like that. That was, I don't know if that's the teacher in you or there's something specific about how you think. I can't tell, but that was what you're like, that's the District of Columbia. I was like, yes, it's not a state. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. But you weren't coming off as like showy that you had this information. You were just making sure everybody was aware. I love that. That was really nice. Oh my God. I don't know why. I was so amused by that. I gotta let that go. You have this boyfriend for a few years now. This guy that you've obviously molded into the person you need him to be. And and now he behaves and he's right. And you're 24 and you're who you are. You're thinking about getting married or no?
Yes, that's definitely on the radar.
Oh yeah, I mean I can smell it on you by the time you're 27 for sure, right?
Yeah, I think I've always said, now this is the type A in me to just lay out my life. I've always said at 25, I'll consider an engagement. Not even I'll get engaged. I'll consider an engagement at 25. And then at 30, that's when I'll, start thinking about kids. I don't know why I mapped out my life that way, but that's kind of the general progression. So then by the time I'm 25, it'll been like 3.5, 4 years. And I think that's a great timeline.
Oh no, I got you. That kid doesn't know. He doesn't know you already have his life worked out pretty well. So he's just needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You better be saving for a ring is what I was thinking. But my question was, you identified your mom as somebody who you felt like was born to be a mother, and you seem like very nurturing. And now you're telling me you do want kids. My question is do you think about that anguish you saw your father go through? Boy, this is going to turn. Having watched his kids be diagnosed, and does that give you any pause about children, or does it just make you think about it differently?
Yeah, this has been honestly a big topic in my life that I've thought of, because when I was first diagnosed, I'd say when I was going through puberty and was really experiencing my burnout, I kind of swore off having kids totally. I was like, I'm not having them. It'd be a high risk pregnancy for me. I know I would feel the same way that my dad did, even though I don't blame him at all. I know I would feel the same way he did. Yeah. Because when I was diagnosed, he had to drive separate to the hospital, which was about 40 minutes away, where they had an endocrinology unit for pediatrics. And he had to drive separate because he was crying the whole time.
Yeah.
And when my brother was diagnosed, on the phone, my mom was talking to my brother when he was in the ER, and my dad said, I did it to another one. That was his first reaction.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And even though, and that just breaks my heart, because I would never, ever consider that my dad's fault. It's just our genetics. We can't control that.
Sure.
And I know I would feel the same way. So I've actually thought about, especially with my dad being adopted, I've actually thought about adoption. And that's something that honestly, really early on, my boyfriend and I had just kind of mentioned is, yeah, adoption is a great way to go, just because it, for now, would still be a pretty high risk pregnancy for me. And I don't want to have to live with that guilt if I were to have a child with diabetes. Yes, I'd be a great mentor for them, and I would still love them just the same. It would not affect how I feel for them, but living with that guilt would be really hard.
Well, listen, I don't want to crush your plan there, but your dad's parents adopted him and got a kid with diabetes.
I know.
So what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine if you adopted a kid and it got type 1 diabetes? You'd be like, oh my God. Don't you? So here, let me put you in that scenario. You have the thought you adopt a kid, the kid ends up getting type 1 diabetes. Do you ever think I could have just made a baby myself? And right? Isn't life weird?
True. That is true.
Listen, there's no planning is what I'm trying to teach you, but I'm not sure if you're getting it or not. Yeah, you can't plan. What you could do is prepare yourself to believe what you said, which is that this is a genetic thing and that I have no control over this whatsoever, that none of us have any control over anything. Because I would be afraid for you that you would adopt a baby that one day, I don't know, couldn't poop right. And you'd be like, see, this kid has a problem too. They're all going to have a problem, because I think a lot of people have medical issues.
That's true.
I think some people get it into their heads that like an illness is something that doesn't happen to other people. If it's happening to you, then you think it doesn't happen to other people. And if it doesn't happen to you, you just think, oh, that's something that happens to other people. Do you know what I mean? I think the truth is, the longer I do this podcast, the more people I talk to, the more you realize that everybody sort of has something that they're dealing with, you know? So I don't know. I've talked to you for a while now. I'd like to see more kids that think like you on the planet. So with a nice deep voice.
Yes.
That's what I want.
That's the thing. I'm still young. And if I go by my plan, I still have about 6 years until I have kids. So I do have plenty of time to think about it. And who knows? By then, with how the landscape of diabetes has changed just the past 5 years, I can't imagine how much it will change throughout the next 5 years.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just interviewed a woman yesterday whose son used Tzield So his sister had type 1. They got the family screened. The boy had 3 markers. He qualified for TZL, took it, and now they're hoping that it holds off his type 1 for years, possibly. And, who knows where like even that drug will lead and what it'll come up with, or how much better these algorithms will get for insulin pumps and things like that. Like there's so much stuff moving forward. It doesn't look anything like when your dad grew up, honestly.
Absolutely. And the screenings are so much more accurate now. What's interesting is my brother, when I was diagnosed, he was screened through the TrialNet screenings, and he didn't have any of the markers for it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I mean, things change. He also, so I always say, like, of course this would happen for me with certain scenarios. So like the adoption thing, when you said, what are the chances you would get, a kid that ends up having diabetes anyway? I would say, well, that's just how my life is going to go. Because my brother, when he was diagnosed, he had just moved to Texas like 4 months prior. We're like, of course that happened. Of course it was when you moved, halfway across the country. Yeah. Of course, because why wouldn't it?
Well, that's
things like that.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. You ever notice how many people are diagnosed on like vacation?
Or on Halloween?
Yeah, or you have breaks in school. Mm-hmm. Like what I really think is what happens is the diagnoses happen when people's lives slow down enough that they can see what's going on around them. They have time to think about it. Mm-hmm. That's why they catch it on vacation, because on vacation they're not thinking about a million other things like they are during that's been my assumption from hearing so many people's stories. I think you'll I think you'll do what you'll do. I think planning for it is tough. My wife told me that before she met me, she wanted to move to New York City, buy an apartment, put all white furniture in it, and never let anybody in there, so it stayed nice and clean. And I was like, okay. And then I ruined
that. Sounds a little like American Psycho.
Well, she's a little weird. But no. She's like, I just had this picture of like, I think she grew up in a very chaotic house. Mm-hmm. And I think she like was looking for it not to be like that. If that
makes sense.
Yeah, that's my guess a little bit. I think the white furniture is more of an allegory for she wanted like some calm. But anyway, then we, got married. She didn't expect that to happen. We got pregnant. Nobody expected that to happen. And like now I think I've been married like 27 years or something like that. So I should probably buy her a white sofa at some point. You know what I mean? Actually, that's a good idea. Write
it down so you don't forget.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to forget. I want to understand. You said you had a Libre and you hoped to, so you like Libre, or you need it because of your insurance. What's your situation there?
I really love the Libre. Mm-hmm. Personally, I have the Libre 3, so it's really small. It's a lot like the Dexcom G7. In college, I used the Dexcom G6. And personally, this is nothing against Dexcom. I just had a lot of troubles with it. Mm-hmm. I know they replace it if you have issues, but it was getting to the point where every sensor I was getting was either faulty, or there was one time, it still makes me like shiver. I put it on and the applicator wouldn't detach. So I had to rip the whole thing off. Oh, it was so painful.
Actually, Alyssa, wait, the G6 wouldn't attach?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what you could have done? This is going to sound crazy.
Oh, no.
You could have whacked it with a wooden kitchen spoon once and it would have released. I can't believe I know that.
How do you know that?
Well, because it was like it was a hack. It was a hack that was going around on the internet. So sometimes the applicator got stuck. It didn't happen a lot, but it got stuck. And then if you whacked it, like I gave it a good thump with a wood spoon, it would release. I'd like to say that Dexcom's a sponsor, dexcom.com/juicebox. I don't notice anybody talking about it online anymore. Like, I think it's a thing that maybe happened and they figured it out and took care of it.
And I'm sure they have, because my dad loves his Dexcom. Yeah, my brother has the G7 and he really loves that.
That's what my daughter uses. Yeah.
It was just, I think I was a sophomore in college. I did not have a wooden spoon in my dorm room, unfortunately. A wooden kitchen spoon.
Yeah.
But it was just, trying it over and over again. I was just getting frustrated. And, being a college student, my sophomore year, I had transferred. So I was in a new environment, a new school. So that was also a big change for me.
Yep.
And that's when I was just kind of like, I need something different to try just to see if I like it. Mm-hmm. And so I got on the Libre 2 And I really loved at the time, because they were very different designs, I loved how flat it was.
Yeah.
And kind of how sleek it looked. So I ended up just really loving the Libre 2 and have stuck with it. But I'm not against using a Dexcom G7 by any means.
Libre 3 is great. But what pump are you using, or are you not?
I'm still on MDI.
You're MDI. So do you want a pump, but you're waiting for the Libre to work with the pump?
So like I said earlier, I'm really stubborn. And I've lived my whole life with MDI, and change is hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep convincing myself I need to wait until the perfect moment, I guess, or the perfect pump comes along. This is turning into a therapy session. And honestly, I was just in actually Washington, D.C., which may be why I mentioned it earlier.
Right.
And I was working with the American Diabetes Association for their Call to Congress event. And I was hearing from some diabetes educators about different CGMs they have now and different pumps. And I was like, that seems really cool and also really nice to have in my life.
Yeah.
So I'm really considering at my next endo appointment saying, hey, can I get a training session on some of these pumps?
Is it a control thing? Do you think that's why you like the MDI? Yeah.
I think so. And also with kind of the same sentiment my dad had, where I don't want anything to feel like it's weighing me down, because I'm very active. I'm always thinking about the next step, always doing something. If I sit still too long, I will go crazy. So having something that doesn't feel like I'm attached to too many things or something could get caught or in the way.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I know I'm a very adaptable person because of my diabetes, and I know I would be able to adapt my life to fit what I need it to do, especially if it's for my health.
Yeah. Oh, I think you'd really enjoy it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your A1C right now, may I ask?
It's, oh gosh, what was it? Like 6 point something. 6 point, oh gosh.
On the high side of 6.5 or the low side of 6.5?
It might have been 6.5.
Okay.
Exact.
Yeah. I mean, listen,
right in the middle.
First of all, you're doing well. Like nobody, would say otherwise. But I mean, just the sleeping on an algorithm is amazing. I mean, nothing that can compare to how I sleep now versus how I slept before my daughter used an algorithm pump, and for her as well. So if for no other reason, look at it for that reason. And if you go with Omnipod 5, and this is going to sound like a plug, but it's not. I have two 3-part series. At least listen to the Omnipod 5 Pro Tip series before you set it up, because the way you set it up dictates how it goes. And you want to have settings right on day one. It makes it much easier and a much more enjoyable experience in the beginning. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to sleep so much better. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it'll help with I guess if it's feet on the floor, dawn phenomenon, whatever it is that happens in the morning for me, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah. When your blood sugar starts to rise, it'll start to move insulin to try to meet that. And you won't have to do anything about it. Like right now, you'd literally have to get out of bed and give yourself an injection to stop that.
Right.
Yeah. When do you shoot your basal, in the morning or at night?
I do it in the morning.
Yeah.
I used to do it at night, and then I would get lows every night. This was probably my senior year of high school. I would do my Lantus, and then I would wake up every night in the middle of the night with a low. And so I had to start doing it in the morning.
Alysa, are you still using a Lantus?
Well, I'm on the generic one, Basaglar, because that's what insurance made me do.
Okay.
But yes, I use that for my basal.
Because what I was going to say was, even if you could get to Tresiba,
I've heard great things about it.
Yeah, that might give you better 24-hour coverage. Because that's the other thing, is that if you're shooting your basal in the morning, your basal's pretty much shot in the morning. So you have nothing to combat that rise. So you might let's think about what was happening. You were shooting at night and getting low overnight. So you moved your basal to the morning. Huh.
Yes.
I wonder if you could move your basal to earlier in the day, and that way have it in long enough where you don't get low overnight, but it's not gone in the morning. Like, does that make sense to what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also heard from some people that they have some of their patients do half in the morning, half at night.
Split it. Yeah.
But that's something I plan on asking my endocrinologist in my upcoming appointment is, what are some other methods to do the basal? Because I am tired of, if I can help it, the higher blood sugars throughout the day and then lower at night.
You did a very nice thing coming on the podcast today and help me. I'm going to help you now. Okay.
Okay.
Episode 1000 through episode 1026 is the Diabetes Pro Tip series from the podcast. I'm going to tell you that a lot of these things that I hear you wondering about are going to be covered in there, and that most people who listen to this podcast series tell me they get an A1C of 6 or lower. You should try it. I just give it a shot. Okay. So yeah. It'll take you, I don't know, take you like a week to listen through it. But I guarantee you that a lot of those little questions about, so you're not thinking about the timing of the insulin the way I would. And I don't have, like, if I try to explain it all to you now, like, you're just going to be like, he could have just sent me to this series. So this series, it's absolutely free, obviously, but give it a try, because I think that it might help you a lot. And I think that it's possible you could find a way to help your father and your brother with it too. We didn't talk about your brother's management, but let me just say this. At my funeral, I hope somebody brings up this series, because I think that that's how many people it's helped. So I think it would be a valuable use of your time. Plus, you're traveling a lot, so you got nothing else to do but listen to the podcast anyway.
That is true. I'll definitely, I wrote it down.
Oh, good. Well, look at you. I didn't think you wouldn't, by the way. And my last question, and I'm going to let you go then. Being Miss Iowa has responsibilities, right?
Yes.
But you're also teaching. So how do you balance that? Is it like having 2 jobs?
For me, I have taken a break from teaching to be Miss Iowa full time.
Okay.
But I still teach private lessons. So I do work 2 jobs, but not in the classroom or the traditional sense of teaching, I guess. So
to be Miss Iowa or Miss anything, like, it's a full-time job for a year, or is it a full-time job to try to, like, get into the pageant? Like give me that idea of, like, what is it you're able, like, how much time does it take to accomplish what you did, I guess?
There's definitely some nuance. So you win the local title, and that advances you to the state level. Being a local title holder is by no means a full-time job. It's kind of up to you to decide what commitment you want to give to that title. So I represented the county that I live in now. So Polk County. I was Miss Polk County. I was crowned in October of 2022, and I did about 60 different events throughout my time from October through June. And I was also balancing teaching full-time in the classroom, doing community service, diabetes work, etc., and also preparing for the different phases of competition.
Right.
So practicing the modeling, the song, the interview portion, all those sorts of things. And then come June, school year's already ended. I actually accepted a different position at a different school. So I already was thinking about, moving into a new classroom and all those things. And then lo and behold, I win Miss Iowa in June of 2023.
Right.
So I had to call up my school district, because it is in my Miss Iowa contract that if it's possible, this becomes my full-time job. So I had to call my school. And also with teaching, I realized that if I were trying to do both of these things, I would not be able to give Miss Iowa and, the diabetes community 100%. And I also would not be able to give my students 100%. And that would have really broken my heart. So I knew that letting them have a teacher that could give them 100% would have been really soothing for me to know going into this job. So being Miss Iowa is definitely a commitment, because I'm booking all my own gigs. I am traveling to all of our 99 counties, because of course we can't have 100. We have to have 99. And I've traveled 40,000 miles. I've been to 63 of the counties so far, and I still have 2 more months. And then I'll go back to teaching in the classroom.
Wow. Look at you. That's wonderful. Well, a ton of effort too. So
well,
good for you.
you.
Yeah, no, the follow through is big. Easy to say I want to do something, but when all these steps come up and all the obstacles and the things you have to conquer or fight through, a lot of people back up and go, oh, I know, it's a lot of work, but you didn't do that. And so, so you're Miss Iowa. I didn't know I was talking to Miss Polk County too. My goodness.
Well, not anymore, because then I got the promotion to Miss Iowa. So
it's really lovely. It's just been really nice to meet you and to talk. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
You did have fun? I was so afraid you were going to hate me. Well, when this started, I was like, this is going to be one where at the end, I'm like, oh, she doesn't like me at all. But you did have a good time. You have your really lovely way about you. I appreciated it.
Well, thank you.
Of course.
I did have fun. I can reassure you. I did have a good time.
Excellent. Excellent. Hold on 1 second for me, okay? Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenedfortype1.com for more info. I want to thank the Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast and invite you to go to eversensecgm.com/juicebox to learn more about this terrific device. You can head over now and just absorb everything that the website has to offer, and that way you'll know if Eversense feels right for you. eversensecgm.com/juicebox. A huge thanks to the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Learn more and get started today at contournext.com/juicebox. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following the podcast in your favorite audio app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do that now. Seriously, just to hit follow or subscribe will really help the show. If you go a little further in Apple Podcasts and set it up so that it downloads all new episodes, I'll be your best friend. And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll probably send you a Christmas card. Would you like a Christmas card? If you have type 2 or pre-diabetes, the Type 2 Diabetes Pro Tip series from the Juicebox Podcast is exactly what you're looking for. Do you have a friend or a family member who is struggling to understand their type 2 and how to manage it? This series is for them. 7 episodes to get you on track and up to speed. Episode 860, Series Intro. 864, Guilt and Shame. Episode 869, Medical Team. 874, Fueling Plan. Episode 880, Diabetes Technology. Episode 885, GLP-1s, metformin, and insulin. And in episode 889, we talk about movement. This episode is with me and Jenny Smith. Of course, you know Jenny is a certified diabetes care and education specialist. She's a registered and licensed dietitian, and Jenny has had type 1 diabetes for over 30 years. Too many people don't understand their type 2 diabetes, and this series aims to fix that. Share it with a friend or get started today. Hey, what's up, everybody? If you've noticed that the podcast sounds better and you're thinking like, how does that happen? What you're hearing is Rob at Wrong Way Recording doing his magic to these files. So if you want him to do his magic to you, wrongwayrecording.com. You got a podcast? You want somebody to edit it? You want Rob.